What was Mary like as a mother?
Fantastic.
So say as a mother she was.
Oh, as a mother, Mary was fantastic. Um, Prior to Keith being born, she had a miscarriage. And I suggested at that point that she stay home and not work. And then when she got pregnant again, by her not working, Keith was born. And then um, she didn't go to a job for years after that. Um, she stayed home with Keith until I started a business. And she came in the business like part-time as secretary.
What are some of the things that you saw her impart into Keith?
Uh, well, Keith was a very smart young man. And he was not the kind of youngster that you had to scold or stuff like that. You would just have conversations with him. And I can remember a particular incident where I came home for dinner, and she says, when we finish dinner, we have to chat. So, okay, so dinner was over, we put things away, and she handed me a phone bill, and this phone bill was $750 and change. And so I said, well, how does this come about? Well, during that time, Keith had set up what's called a bulletin board. This is in the early stages of the computer. And he was on the phone a lot, and he ran the phone bill up. So uh, my first remark was, boy, you're grounded. but then as we talked, he said, Dad, he says, if you'll buy me a some sort of a gadget, then my phone bill won't be high anymore. It'll go back uh, as natural. So knowing that he had both my support and his mother's support, I said, okay, I'll buy you this gadget. And the gadget turned out to be $900. but but I figured it was better to spend the $900 than the $750 a month.
Correct.
And maybe if I cut it down, it still wouldn't help. The 900 was a wise investment. So we made the investment, and everything was fine from then on. But Mary's relationship with him was a very loving one, a very caring one. Certainly he loved his mother very much.
You know, so, some people they come onto the planet and they take up space and they suck up air and eat a lot of food and so on and so forth, but they don't really make a contribution. Other people, the world is a better place because they came. We know that's the case with Mary. But in your opinion, why was the world and why were people better off because Mary came onto this planet?
Well, first of all, she was an extraordinary teacher. Uh, like you said, she taught many places around the world. I didn't name them all. Her impact on people was a very pleasant one and a very good one. Everyone loved Mary.
Okay, do you have any questions or
Yeah, well, maybe talk about some of her experiences, because sort of like what Aunt Jamie did, she's like standing in for Uncle James. So maybe if you can put yourself in her place and maybe just go back over some of those when first time she went to Africa, or some of the places she was actually teaching. Maybe spend a few minutes on that. Can you do that?
Well, we weren't married when she went to Africa. She went to Africa as a single lady, and England
Because
as
that was
a
all
single
before
lady.
your time.
That was
But
before
you
me.
remember her talking about it, right?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, so talk about it a little bit. Go ahead.
In what regard?
Okay, well, we weren't married when she went to Africa, but I remember her saying while she was in Africa, da 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 da, or whatever
Hmm.
the case might be.
She had a lovely time in Africa. She taught teachers. Um, she had a gardener that she was very fond of. She traveled around quite a bit, and it was a wonderful experience for her. As a matter of fact, she wrote 2 books, one in coordination with another teacher, and then a book herself called Elephants Enough, which was a very good book, very well received, widely accepted everywhere she went, and it was published several times.
And was that for students? Was that
For students, right?
Okay, I
Yeah.
remember something about a primary reader.
Right, it was a primary reader.
Mhm.
Yes.
Okay. Joe, pull out some other questions that I put down. Because you know where some of the places she was. She was in Rome for a while, wasn't she?
Yes.
I don't remember. Well, she was in East Africa and places like that.
Yeah.
Well, let me ask you something, Don. You talked about the Kennedys and all their accomplishments and things like that. How do you feel? You fit into all that, and then maybe tell us about some of your businesses and your accomplishments. We were talking about being independent thinkers and starting your own businesses. You come into a family where people have done a lot of things. Now, some people that can intimidate them, some people that can motivate them. Anything along those lines? How you fit in with all that?
Well, first of all, my father instilled upon me very early in life that wherever you live, you got to own. So when I came to New York, the first thing I started doing was working 2 full-time jobs in order to get a down payment. I was married at the time. I don't know if you want me to go into that or not, but I will. I was married at the time, and that marriage did not work out. So I always considered myself the first house I bought it twice. So,
Look more toward me.
okay, so after I had been divorced, I imagine for a couple of years is when I met Mary, or for some time is when I met Mary, and she had been divorced also, so that was good. The big question was that I had a son and she didn't have a child. And so that was a big concern of mine, whether she would understand, the love of a child. But that didn't turn out to be a problem at all. As a matter of fact, it turned out to be a benefit because after having Keith, we did have to work with my other son, Donald, for a few years.
Okay.
Just tell me about some of your business experiences.
Because you've been doing so many things.
Now, you've done a lot of things yourself.
You're a great entrepreneur. You've always been.
It's interesting that you say that because I was always an introvert. I never considered myself a business person. But the interesting thing was I grew up in a one-parent family, my mother. And although I had other relatives around, I had aunts and uncles, nieces, and everything else, and a great-grandfather. So the great-grandfather was really my role model. And my teachers kind of taught me to go towards the area of chemistry because I had a kind of a knack for that in the lower grades. Anyway, I went to college to be a chemist. But before I went to college, that's a whole story in itself. There was never any thought of me going to college as I was going to graduate. But I heard someone say that a local millionaire was going to send a black student to college because he had sent a lot of white students to college, and he was white himself. So one day I convinced the bus driver, who we had to bus to school, to drop me off at his office. He didn't want to do it, but after some haranguing and what have you, he did it. And I go in and I meet this gentleman who was a multimillionaire, and I mentioned to him the fact that rumor has it that you've been talking about sending a black youngster to school, and if you are serious about it, then I'd like to be put into consideration.